The Future History of Energy and Transportation. Documenting the paradigm shift from the era of oil and internal combustion to the era of robotics. By Julian Cox. Narrated by the author with the aid of an artificial intelligence. Chapter 17. Of Ride-Sharing and Uber. Uber may well have been conceived as a cheeky kind of Napster of hardware, but at its core it is, or has evolved to become, a BYOD bring-your-own-device labor exchange, analogous to an eBay of human labor. It is not genuinely a hardware-as-a-service business tackling a 95% underutilization of a fixed asset, better exemplified by Airbnb. Unlike breaching the copyright of digital music, neither does ride-sharing break more than the most superficial of conventions of the car dealership and owner-driver business model, because in the case of Uber, the shared item is a car, not an immutable digital asset that is trivial to replicate. Cars are far more akin to consumables in the form of mileage depreciation, than by depreciation on a calendar basis. Shortening the service interval to weeks or months instead of months to years, consuming fuel on a per-mile basis and accelerating the pace of repurchasing vehicles, holds no prospect of disrupting the traditional auto industry or any part of its sales, service or fueling model. In the strict sense, disruption literally implies that the economics of scale in a legacy technology is a millstone, upon the advent of an entirely new method of meeting the customer requirement, one that renders economies of scale in an obsolete method, obsolete. A disruptive technology enables the first early adopters to bypass a legacy technology, or business model, altogether, such as electric vehicle owners driving past a gasoline filling station, unconcerned about the cost of gasoline or even an oil embargo. With the maturing of a disruptive technology, individual preference and affordability allows for a market to abandon a legacy technology, or business model, completely. Finally, even those customers that have no appetite for change, are compelled by short supply and scarcity premium of an old technology and the relative cost benefits of the new, as it goes where legacy technology cannot follow. Uber exhibits none of these features. The lack of disruption by Uber is evidenced by auto OEMs, dealers and fuel vendors setting out initiatives aimed at attracting Uber drivers to purchase cars, service them and fuel them, by reason of their greatly accelerated rate of consumption of the auto and oil industry's traditional revenue streams. In the final analysis, the primary net efficiency gain uniquely attributable to ride-sharing operations is some alleviation of parking congestion, nothing remotely on the scale of 95% gains in asset utilization, given that the assets in the case of cars are depreciated primarily by the mile. In other words, an Uber ride is simply a car that is used up more rapidly on a calendar basis. For this reason, a competing hailing service comprising networked autonomous electric vehicles, one that removes much of the cost of fuel and maintenance and all of the cost of the driver, will find it a trivial matter to disrupt Uber in the supply of ride-sharing miles, by the same competitive metrics, of fuel and energy consumption, maintenance, amortization and wireless data communications, applicable to displacing manually operated internal combustion vehicles, in general. In fact, the Uber driver will find it a trivial matter to compete with Uber by purchasing an autonomous EV, instead of purchasing another non-autonomous vehicle to drive for Uber. Moreover, Uber's much publicized urgency to do away with its BYOD drivers, the actual basis of its business, in favor of autonomous vehicles will most likely compel the majority of Uber drivers to do just that, at the first opportunity as a matter of principle, not just for profit. Additionally, Uber is valued at this time of writing on the assumption of staggering capital efficiencies, as a consequence of its drivers fronting the capital to finance the vehicle hardware that supplies Uber's services. This assumption, that individual owners will be willing to front the capital to fund the vast majority of an autonomous ride-hailing fleet, is certain to hold true in the case of Tesla's forthcoming ride-sharing services, because Tesla produces full autonomy prepped vehicles to sell to the customer, from which the customer and Tesla will profit jointly, by deploying them on a forthcoming Tesla ride-hailing network. The Tesla customer, if so inclined, can drive their Tesla for Uber, in the run-up to Tesla making them a far better offer, to get out of the car and let it run ride-sharing services on the Tesla network, for passive income and a profit-sharing relationship with Tesla, not Uber. Uber cannot itself produce any vehicles to sell to a customer, without first buying or developing a company like Tesla. Doing so, in the inordinately improbable event this proved possible, would still defeat the premise of Uber's valuation. Namely, the capital efficiency of generating fleet revenues in software alone, without having to manufacture or purchase any cars. There is no reason to suppose that Uber's market cap is automatically commutable to purchasing a vast autonomous fleet, either. Ostensibly to dispose of the drivers who own Uber's existing fleet. Seeking funds to destroy collateral is an implicit syntax error in financing terms. Like applying for a second mortgage to fund a bulldozer, to flatten the home you wish to offer the bank as collateral, to buy the bulldozer. Assuming an OEM has both achieved full autonomy and is willing to sell robotaxis to Uber to operate for profit, a mixed-mode driven and driverless ride-sharing fleet might be possible for Uber, funded by a market for OEMs to dispose of excess inventory and obsolete vehicles arriving off lease, by connecting those vehicles with casual labor to serve hailing customers. Here there is some synergy, because prospective autonomous vehicle owners market-wide will likely place demand on Uber's services while waiting, potentially years, in line to own a profitable fully autonomous electric vehicle from Tesla, and others capable of selling business to consumer, should they emerge, rather than lose tens of thousands of dollars of their own money sinking it into depreciating non-autonomous vehicles, new or used, given the starkness of that choice. Such a dynamic would both accelerate abandonment and obsolescence of the dealership to consumer business model and simultaneously increase demand for manually driven hailing in the interim. In other words, to produce both a glut of cheap, even freely provided, manually operated fleet vehicles and ride-sharing customers for Uber. Any incremental driverless portion of Uber's fleet would still need to be purchased by Uber, unless supplied by a willing OEM partner on a profit-sharing basis, perhaps forced by an OEM's inability to escape dealership litigants, absent a third-party fleet operator partner such as Uber. In no scenario is the capital to build an Uber autonomous fleet fronted by the broad customer market. Instead, it would need to come from a combination of traditional capital markets, partnerships, or internally generated cash, the latter Uber has yet to demonstrate the ability to generate to date. Under any circumstances, the Tesla full-stack autonomous transit model, meaning from battery production, software and chip design, to miles delivered, is inordinately more capital efficient at any scale, eclipsing that of Uber and the world's vehicle OEMs combined, and in relation to internal combustion, and especially internal combustion with drivers, inordinately more profitable as the market for autonomous ride-hailing emerges. See, Dynamics of Autonomous Mileage Markets. For those Uber drivers able to purchase a new autonomous vehicle, there is no reason to suppose that those drivers would be willing to continue donating their vehicle to Uber as if it were Uber's virtual asset. Not unless Uber's hailing and billing services were the default option of the OEM selling the vehicle, rather than a vehicle manufacturer developing their own hailing and billing service, explicitly to cut out Uber, as is the case with Tesla. Tesla, for obvious reasons of liability, fleet learning, reputation management and profitability, has stated that it will develop and manage its own autonomous hailing and billing middle layer, and that it will expressly disallow third-party autonomous fleet management of Tesla vehicles, by Uber or others. It may be the case that packaging Uber or similar with autonomy might be required by an OEM that was able to develop full autonomy independently of Tesla, to circumnavigate dealer franchise laws in the US. It will be Uber's best and luckiest day if the dealer lobby forces an opening for Uber to auction autonomous passenger mileage belonging to Ford or VW, for example, because Ford and VW was under an injunction barring them from selling autonomous hailing services directly to consumers. Of course, this presumes Ford or VW, and similar, will achieve full autonomy in time to remain a going concern. This is far from guaranteed absent a lifeline from Tesla, in which case Uber is out of luck as far as autonomous ride-sharing goes, regardless. Meanwhile, to define the problem space, Uber's current fleet has a replacement cost, such that if Uber were obliged to purchase it from its drivers, this cost is approximately equal to Uber's entire market cap. This problem is compounded in jurisdictions that have ruled Uber drivers are employees, thereby creating the basis of a labor dispute to dismiss drivers in favor of autonomy. Authors note, given this precedent to elevate ride-sharing drivers to employees, it is imperative for Tesla to shun calls to launch a manual ride-sharing service, as an interim step to launching fully autonomous ride-sharing on a Tesla ride-hailing network. In the context of full autonomy, it is difficult to pinpoint a significant value add that an app and server-based hailing, routing and billing middle layers such as Uber could possibly command payment for. Certainly not payment equal to replacing the value that its drivers currently supply with their driver-owned vehicles. Naturally, a ratings and trust network for drivers is irrelevant for cars without drivers. There are a lot of legacy vehicles in the world and a lot of casual labor willing to drive for a living. As touched upon above, there is a significant opportunity for Uber to operate as a sink for obsolete vehicles, by profit sharing with OEMs in order to run out the miles of cars for which there is inadequate market demand, be that retail or at auction ex lease. Perhaps there are horizontal markets for Uber to explore to connect demand to supply of additional forms of human labor, be that BYOD or not. Pushing an Uber app button for a network-trusted emergency plumber seems eminently sensible, even if the plumber arrives in an autonomous Tesla hailed on the Tesla network. Nevertheless, the most likely default outcome would appear to be that at least most of Uber's current market value proposition as a publicly listed stock will be displaced by vehicle autonomy. While a considerable value of effort may be warranted on the part of Uber's management to analyze what use can be made of vast amounts of data accumulated about ride-sharing customers, post-full autonomy, Uber would appear to be a service provider to one or more OEM. Alternatively, an OEM fleet customer that is special in brand name only, assuming the name isn't savaged by labor disputes with drivers. Whether Uber's management can competently navigate this impending market disruption to its business, to replace, reinvent or even exceed its valuation in future, using any of the ideas described above, or not, is a matter for them. What is a matter for us to note, is that Uber is not the disruptor that it purports to be and is assumed to be uncritically, by empiricists such as Tony Seba engaged in forecasting market disruptions.